What's up guys, today we're going to be going over the DPS meta for the final shape, and in this video we'll be going over all the top options, some things that are getting buffed and nerfed, and just some things I was curious about. And this will be a pretty quick pace, so just a few things before we begin. All the total damage output of these weapons is with max reserves. With the snipers, it takes into account triple tap. All of the damage spec mods are being removed in final shape, so I'm using backup mag where it makes sense instead. And on top of that, we will obviously be taking into account all the nerfs and buffs coming with the final shape. And for the DPS numbers, the first one will be burst, which will basically mean no reloads. So 1 mag or 2 shots of a rocket, so on and so on. And for the mountaintop, it'll be 3. Then for the reload, it's going to be 2 mags for mag weapons, or with rockets for mountaintop 6. Alright, I think that's all I have to say. So let's go ahead and jump right in with bait and switch rocket with G-Horn. This will hit for quite a lot, and bait and switch, the wolf packs on rocket 1 are already buffed, which is pretty good. Total rocket count with max reserves is 9, so all the numbers, the damage per rocket goes up to 193, and which results in the burst of almost 300,000 and over a reload 130, and total damage output of 1.7. Now with the Wendigo, the bait and switch GL, it's a hit for a lot less, but we're going to be shooting a lot faster. Total reserves of this is going to be 28, so the damage goes up to almost 68. The burst is lower than rocket at 244, and the reload is kind of right there at almost 140, while the total is higher at almost 1.9. Now with the Dragon's Breath, this is going to be mostly like a solo weapon for swaps and things like that, and not really something you're going to take into a fire team DPS situation. But just looking at that, the total damage per rocket is very high at 211,000, which means the total damage output is over 2.5 million. So it's very good for like solo play, where you're just going to be shooting it, swapping to something else, and kind of coming back to it. Now moving on to the Levy Breath. This one is only hit for these 2 numbers right here. I'm kind of including this with the explosive options, even though it's kind of like a hybrid. The burst is 78, with reloads 75.1, total 1.9. So the DPS is a lot lower, total is a little bit higher. Then we have the 1000 voices. This scene is alright, as you will see. It's good for total damage output. This DPS isn't near that of rockets or GLs. And looking at that, total ammo is 12, which means the total damage output is 1.7, and the DPS numbers are kind of low, so it's alright. I wouldn't recommend it. And we have 2 more explosive options. The first one I wanted to test was Xenophage. I don't know why, I was just kind of curious. And the damage is pretty low, and the reserves isn't that high for the type of damage it outputs at 34. It means the total is 1.5, and the burst and reload are better than like 1k, but obviously not as good as rockets or GLs. And the final explosive option will be the Parasite. Kind of like the Dragon's Breath, this isn't really like going to be a DPS option, just something to take into account for bursts, hitting for a total of 378,000. So all in all, looking at the explosive heavy weapons, rockets and GLs are clearly on top. Rockets are going to be better for fire team activities, where you have 1 G-Horn and 5 rockets. And for 3-man activities, GLs will definitely be the way to go. The G-Horn isn't quite worth it until you get to like a 6 per activity, but overall both are insanely good, way harder than everything else, and also fit really well with swap combos. So definitely just still going to the final shape. In terms of the weapons we tested so far, definitely looking to be still the DPS meta. And even while reloading these weapons, they still maintain good DPS numbers, but where they really excel is just in those combos as we mentioned. Now moving on to the precision heavy weapons, starting off with the Cataclysm with bait and switch. Its total reserves is going to be 23. With force times the charm, the total damage output will be really high at 2.2 million, and the DPS numbers aren't that great. Not too surprising. Next up will be Whisper of the Worm, which, just like the Cataclysm, will be really good for total damage output, but unlike the Cataclysm, the DPS of Whisper is pretty good, hitting for 76,000, and it's getting the buff for snipers, and the total ammo count is 30. So looking at the total damage output of the Whisper is going to be over 3.5 million with triple tap, and the burst DPS, which kind of barely drops off as you shoot more and more, is at 150,000. So looking pretty good for precision. And the Queenbreaker is getting 2 buffs, one for the linear and one to itself. And the total reserves of the weapon, 24. The burst and sustained DPS isn't bad, but it's definitely not great, and the total isn't nearly as high as the Cataclysm. Next up is the Darcy, once again receiving the sniper buffs. Look at damage on the boss, 44.1 thousand. Total reserves is very high on 140s at 37 bullets, which means the DPS is actually kind of good for the burst and reload, not that of the Whisper, and the total damage is pretty on par with other things, but not as good as the Whisper. Then we also have the Sleeper, which hits for 111,000 and holds 16 ammo, which means the DPS and total is once again not bad compared to a lot of things in the game, just not as good as the Whisper of the Worm. And finally, the last thing I have for like the precision heavy weapons is Lucky Bands, which is a primary, but it may as well be a heavy weapon. So looking at that, every single bullet will give you 60% buff up to times 10 for a total of 600%. And the total damage we do from just one proc of the perk is 622,000, which means the burst DPS is 108,000, which isn't as high as some other things we've seen. But this is free damage and infinite ammo that just will greatly increase your total damage output throughout like multiple phases or within a single phase of a boss fight. So yeah, even though it's not the greatest in terms of numbers, it is just free damage from a primary weapon. But overall, looking at the precision heavy weapons, the standout is obviously Whisper the Worm. It is not only the best DPS with the triple tap procs, it's also by far the highest total damage output probably in the entire game for a weapon. So if you ever need a lot of total damage output, or if it's a precision based boss, just use the Whisper. Now moving on to like the last category, which is gonna be close range weapons and special weapons. Looking at the accuracy first, this will not get the shotgun buff. So looking at the total damage and all that stuff, the total damage is really high at 2.5 million, and the DPS is pretty respectable. So if you need a lot of total damage and it's a close range boss, not a bad option. Now looking at a Frenzy bait and switch sword, swords are getting buff, so I was kind of curious. And looking at all the numbers for this and the total ammo of 68, looking at the DPS, it's actually pretty good at almost 130 then 106. And total damage of just light attacks is 2.5 million. So honestly, not bad at all. And it's a legendary weapon. Next up, moving into the special weapons, starting off with shotguns with a slug. Right now, it's going to hit for 47,000, which will be getting buffed in the final shape. And that means the total damage output is just over 1 million. And burst and reload are 72 and 67. So not bad. This is our first special weapon, so we don't really have anything compared to it yet. The pellet shotguns are receiving a pretty big buff in the final shape. So again, that I'm just going to be using Vorpal. The shotgun I have on right now doesn't have Vorpal, but I'm just going to add it in with the math, along with the buff. Total ammo of 28, which means the total damage output is very similar to that of the slug, and the burst is higher, and the reload is lower. So honestly, a pretty good buff there, and they're kind of pretty well balanced. Now looking at a 140 RPM sniper, the total ammo is going to be very high at 36. So once again, taking into account triple tap and Vorpal, the total damage output is going to be higher than shotguns at 1.6, and the burst and reload are kind of right in the middle of the other two shotguns. So once again, pretty well balanced. And looking at the Cloud Strike, this is going to get buffed to the bullets, but not the lightning strike damage. So that's kind of interesting. And looking at the total ammo, once again, being very high at a 140 with 37. Total damage output is very high at 2.2 million. And the burst and reload are higher than that of anything we've seen for the special so far. So Cloud Strike still seems to be one of the best options for special weapons. Finally, I wanted to show off the Mountaintop. It's getting nerfed quite a bit because it's losing the kinetic boss buff, which takes its numbers down to among the lowest we've seen in the entire video. I'm pretty sure they are the lowest, and just not good overall. Mountaintop is going to be mostly about starting or ending a damage combo. So if we review this kind of weird group I had of close range / special weapons, the takeaways are accuracy isn't bad, but the sword with Frenzy bait and switch is unironically actually good in terms of a close range weapon, outdoing the burst of the accuracy, having nearly the same sustained DPS and a lot higher total damage output. And then between the slug, 140 RPM shotgun, and sniper, They're all pretty close in all their numbers. The sniper gets a little bit of edge because it has triple tap for total damage output, but they're honestly pretty well balanced, and that leaves with Cloud Strike still being among the best for special DPS in the game. I didn't put Fourth Horseman in this video. That'd be even higher for like burst in the right situation. So that's definitely something to keep in mind also, but Cloud Strike definitely seems to be the way to go. And Mountaintop mostly might just be for starting a combo and proccing bait and switch. And that brings me to combos. So starting off combos, there's gonna be a few weapons you could use in like the connect slot. You could use a Hone Edge ×4, you can use Wither Horde, or you can use like a Mountaintop with recombination. And all three of these are gonna be getting effectively lower DPS in the final shape because they're losing the kinetic buff to bosses. So just comparing the damage of these three different weapons, seeing which one would be the best to start off a combo. As you see, the damage of a ×4 is gonna be 156. Wither Horde in total is 137, and Mountaintop recombination ×10 is 102. So in terms of just raw damage, Izanagi's is the best, but if you're going to need to shoot multiple times to proc bait and switch within a damage phase, I still think Mountaintop is going to be better, and Mountaintop allows you to use the Cloud Strike, which leads to my two favorite combos in the game, and both these take advantage of Rain of Fire on Warlock, or you can use Marksman Dodge on Hunter. And for a Cascade GL, it looks a little bit like this, starting off with the Mountaintop. Then I shoot 3 Cloud Strike to proc triple tap and the Lightning Strike. I shoot off a mag of the GL, shoot 3 Cloud Strike again, and shoot off the GL, finish like the combo, and rinse and repeat. And just in that little combo, I did almost 1.3 million damage and a DPS of 140,000, which is really good over like using all of your ammo. And the other one that I like to use is the same thing, but just with a rocket. And on this one, the second time you shoot Cloud Strike in the combo, you gotta shoot a few more times to give reconstruction time to proc on the rocket. And then, once again, the numbers are almost exact same. So these two combos are my go-to if I'm just like raw trying to put out damage. And the thing about both these combos is you want to shoot all of your heavy ammo, either the GL or rocket, in the phase. But depending on how long the damage phase is, really determines how many times you shoot Cloud Strike between. I would say you'd always want to shoot 3 each time, but if it's a long damage phase and you find yourself shooting through the GL ammo way faster than the sniper ammo, obviously shoot maybe 6 times instead. So it's really something you just kind of change depending on the counter and the boss, but both are among the best combos in the game. The final one will be the Lucky Pants, where you start off with the Warden's Law, and during this combo, as you'll see, the DPS is slightly lower, but the free damage you're getting from Lucky Pants will greatly increase your total damage output throughout the entire encounter or phase, and really can't be beat. Add in a Nighthawk to start off, and yeah, Hunters are obviously very strong right now. And once again, depending on the boss and depending on what exactly you're doing, you might change the combo up a little bit here and there. But yeah, I think that's gonna be it for the video for the most part. Main takeaways is the GL's rockets still on top. Then for total damage output and precision, Whisper seems to be the best and by far the way to go. And for combos, depending on what your character you're playing Warlock with Rain of Fire, definitely take advantage of the 2 I showed off in this video. If you're playing Hunter, I showed off one of the combos, but there's all kinds of different things you can do on Hunter. And yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you guys next time.